Welcome to the Pole Rehab Podcast.
We talk about injury prevention, strength training, and recovery for dancers. I'm Michelle from Flow Motion Studio.
And I'm Goddess from By Goddess. And today we're going to break down one of the most important and most misunderstood muscles involved in pole, the rotator cuff.
With that, we're going to talk about what it actually is, why it matters so much for pole, and how understanding it is going to help you avoid shoulder pain and shoulder injuries, help you train with more confidence and more control, just so you can have a better understanding of the anatomy, of the visual, and be able to visualize within your practice.
And remember, our goal as always is to help dancers train smarter, feel stronger, and keep doing what they love for years without pain or injury.
Okay, so first thing we're going to break down of what the actual rotator cuff is. So we're going to add a picture. It's going to be, I think it's going to be on this side in between us, but it's going to go over the rotator cuff muscles and they're going to be labeled for you. And we took out most of the other detailed stuff of a detailed diagram just so it shows you those basic areas. So with that, the first one we're going to talk about is the supraspinatus muscle and then the infraspinatus muscle. And with those, they're going to be located on the top of the shoulder here and here. And the supraspinatus muscle is going to be what affects lifting your arm up and stabilizing through the humerus. And then the infraspinatus on the back side helps you with rotating your arm externally. So when you're turning your arm out and having that full range of motion. So it's going to help with stabilizing through the shoulder and through those movements, anything that's out wide. So if you're thinking like air walks while we're hanging, we're going to want to keep those two engaged. And then any spins that you're doing or any climbs where you're pulling yourself up, you're going to be working those muscles.
Right, so next we're going to talk about the teres minor. So that's located a little bit lower and it's responsible for external rotation. So honestly, when it comes to external rotation, it's in most of the things that we're doing when we are holding the pole in true grip. So if you think about it, if your teachers have ever told you to pull your scapula down towards your waist, then you are most likely externally rotating in order to be able to do that. So in most things, we need to be able to have that range of motion. So the shoulder is handling that. And then we also have the subscapularis, which is located in front of the shoulder blade. And so that one is actually doing our internal rotation. So if you think about our twisted grip, anything Aisha is going to be putting our subscapularis at the forefront.
The one last thing that we're going to mention, which technically isn't a muscle it's not technically one of the major four muscles, but it's still an important minor muscle. It's kind of referred to as the lat's little helper, and it's called the trace major. And that is also going to be really close to the trace minor. It's right next to it, basically directly underneath of it. We're going to point a little arrow because it's not labeled on our diagram, but we're going to point a little arrow to where it would be. But we just wanted to mention that one because that one is also there and it's going to help with that stabilization. So it's going to stabilize through the shoulder joint. Next, we're going to talk about common issues dancers are going to run into from overworking, overtraining, working on something that they haven't done before, working on those new muscles. And with that, a lot of times girls who haven't ever really done a lot of shoulder or upper body exercise and start pole and try and do a little too much, they might have shoulder pain or shoulder clicking, where whenever you lift your shoulder up, it starts to click a little. And that usually is from your shoulder not being stable within the joint. Were you going to say something?
I was just mentioning I have shoulder clicking.
Oh, fair. I also have shoulder clicking. We both have shoulder clicking. It's common. It's not horrible if that happens to you, but it is common.
Yeah, I don't know that it hurts so much as it just like feels uncomfortable. Like it's like I know it's
clicking or pain is like those are two different things. So like you can have pain in your shoulder, right? And then that same area can also cause clicking separately. So they're not necessarily the same injury. It's just two similar spots, basically, I guess that's a better way to say it. It's basically the cause of the rotator cuff not controlling your full movement so it can shift or run. So if it's shifting and rubbing, it's usually just going to cause a little click. But if you cause a little bit more damage or continue overworking without like really paying attention to those clicks, that's whenever it'll start causing more pain. So as long as you're not over pushing it, it's really just going to click for you, and it doesn't have to be a big problem. But it's whenever you push past it without recognizing that instability is whenever it starts to be more of a concern. And then you got the next one?
Okay. Next we have weak or shaky inverts. So usually if we are a little shaky and we like to jump into our inverts, a lot of our students love to do that. It might be just because our shoulder stability is not there. So it might not be like a strength thing. I think a lot of my students are like, oh, I don't have body strength. I can't do this. I can't do that. Can't get the hips over the head. But it might really just be that the shoulder is not stabilized properly. So that's a common issue. And then the bigger muscles are trying to do the work, basically. So we have a stabilizer, we have a main muscle, and then we have a antagonist, something that's kind of working against it. So everything is working, but sometimes we try to put all the work on one muscle. And so obviously one muscle can't do every single thing. We need like a whole ecosystem to work. So when we try to place all of the work on one muscle, then we have no stabilization.
Exactly. The next one we're going to talk about is one side being stronger than the other, having different muscle imbalances, and what that can kind of lead to. Now, overall, I think we can all agree most dancers have muscle imbalance, along with most athletes. Whoever has a dominant side, unless you're is it ambidextrous where you can do both sides? Unless you're doing both sides like super awesome, you're probably going to have a little bit of a muscle imbalance. The goal is to try and counteract it and try and build up that weaker side to keep them closer to equal. Because if you don't, it's only going to become a bigger and bigger gap the further your practice goes. And with that, it often is caused through the strength and control within your rotator cuff. So you might have like a really strong bicep, but your rotator cuff you didn't strengthen, and that's where that instability starts to show those imbalances. I know, like 3 years into my training, when I was definitely training my sides wrong, I like tried to look at my like wings, and I could like see that one side was bigger than the other, and I was like, oh my god, I hate that. And so I immediately started working my other side better. But I did it just because I noticed it visually. And if we're not doing those little check-ins, sometimes we can get that gap to be too big. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had the same issue. Because I hurt my right shoulder, I was like, okay, I have to like amp it up on the right side. And so one day I was training, and then I'm like looking at the camera as I'm recording myself, and I'm like, wait a second. I put my arms up, and I'm like, is my right bigger than my left? And I don't know if it still is. I haven't checked in a while, but it definitely was. And so then I started to kind of pay a little bit more attention to my left side, so that I didn't kind of pump it up too much because I was overcompensating on my right. So it's really funny that you say that. I'm like, yeah.
I think it's common. I think it's really common, and we just might not always notice it unless we check in with ourselves and we're looking at our recordings and looking at pictures. But oftentimes you can see your imbalance if it gets to a bigger extreme and you're working on harder things.
And then the last issue that we want to discuss is fatigue in the shoulders before grip. So if that happens, then that means your small stabilizers are overworking. So when we first start pole, especially, like we're not ever squeezing things or like holding our entire weight in our hands. So it can be a little bit of a culture shock to the body. And so the body might be looking for like what other muscles I need to be working. And if you haven't woken up those stabilizers, then you might overwork certain stabilizers that shouldn't be overworked, if that makes sense. So you want to pay attention to when and how it feels when you start to get tired, and don't be afraid to like take a break. Like I know sometimes when we first start pole, it's like no, like I've got to train because if I don't practice, then I won't get better. But it's important to understand when you're fatiguing because when fatigue starts to set in, you kind of can't control it. It's almost like falling asleep when you're driving, right? It kind of just happens, and before you know it, it's just done. So you don't want to be in a trick, and then before you know it, you just fatigued, and now you're on the floor, right? So we want to pay attention to what those signs are when we're starting to lose not the grip, but the shoulder stability. And just know that they're just not conditioned yet. So we want to do exercises that are going to put ourselves in the position that a trick would without the trick, if that makes sense. So we don't want the trick to be the only time that we actually work certain muscles. So we want to condition those before we get into the trick with doing other exercises, incorporating yoga, incorporating bands. Do that beforehand so you can get yourself ready for the big trick so that your muscles are stabilized.
Mm-hmm. So with that, before we close, we're just going to go over a couple of tips to help protect your muscles, protect your tendons, protect everything as we go. And the first one, we kind of touched on it in the last video, but we're going to mention it again because it's so important, and it's warming up before you start. And when I say warm up, I mean actually warm your muscles. So if that means like lately for me, as I'm coming back from injury, I have a heat pack it's like a heat and ice pack. It goes around my neck. You can put it in the microwave or the freezer. And if I'm going to pull, I put that around my neck and I physically heat my shoulders before I pull. I'm also going to do some warm exercises. But if you live somewhere where it's cold, I personally don't think it sounds like a bad idea to have a hot pack on my shoulders as I'm coming into the studio because it's just going to help my muscles be more ready. Because if you live somewhere where it's 20 degrees, your muscles are colder walking into the studio. So even if you do a little bit of a warm up, you might not really be warm enough based on the weather. And then in the summertime, you might not need that hot pack. You might just roll the windows down and it be hot outside and you're like already decently warm. But just checking in with those things and recognizing that physical heat can warm your muscles up and help loosen them. You don't want to do just heat or just stretching, but like adding a little mixture of both is a really great way to just help if you're feeling fatigued, if you're feeling a little tense, or if you're already sore going to another pole class. Yeah.
Also, we want to keep our shoulders active, especially while polling. So, a lot of my students, the studio that I teach at, they also have aerial. So, some of my students come over from like Hammock and Lyra, the big metal hoop. And so, when you do those apparatuses, there's moments where you can kind of just like hang out and chill. Like you are active, but not as active as like on the pole. So, on the pole, you have to like really engage constantly. And so when we are doing like one arm movements or even like spins where we have to support ourselves with just our hands, it's very important that you're not hanging from your bones because your bones cannot support all that weight. That's why we have muscle around it. So you want to make sure that you're engaging some of the muscles that we discussed in order to support the shoulder so that you're not putting too much weight there.
And with that, I know Goddess was talking earlier about those small stabilizing areas that's not necessarily the rotator cuff, but those extra muscles and tendons that are going to help support around it. So we're just going to mention what they are. We're not going to go into crazy detail on them, but just kind of let you know that they exist, that they're there to support you. Because when you can visualize your anatomy, visualize your muscles and tendons on the pole, it's easier to be able to feel where you're going to need to engage and feel where you're looking for pain, tension, soreness, and nice warm energy to be able to start your practice. So the first one that we're going to go over is the serratus anterior, and that keeps the shoulder blade stable against your ribs. This is going to be essential for active hangs and pushes. So anybody who's had like rib slipping or things like that, it's not necessarily where your rib is slipping. That's usually a little bit lower down, but just above that area is going to be where your serratus anterior is going to be located.
All right. And then we have the lower trapezius, which pulls your shoulder blade down and back. and protects your shoulders and quads and split grip. So I was kind of mentioning before, if your instructor has ever told you to pull your back down towards your waist or to pull your shoulder maybe away from your ear, then you're most likely also engaging that muscle there.
Perfect. And then the last two we're going to mention is the middle traps and the rhomboids. And that's going to be, we all know these ones right here, right at the back, kind of under the scalenes. And then the rhomboids are like going down the two sides of the spine. So if your spine's here, your rhomboids are coming straight down. And if you've ever had an intense pull practice or an intense heavy arm lifting day, you have definitely had your rhomboids and your traps be sore. So these muscles are super important to keep strong because they do a lot of work for us. They're going to control our shoulder blade positioning and keep us sturdy. So if your rhomboids and your traps aren't strong and able to support you, your shoulders aren't going to be able to support you nearly as well. You're going to feel way weaker that day. You're maybe going to not hit your tricks. So it's good to always make sure that we're working these, we're checking in on them, and we're kind of noticing, are we having too much tension here today? Or are we feeling really strong here today? Do we need extra strength in this area? Just kind of checking in with that and kind of setting our foundation within the rotator cuff and letting us fully understand our back body as we're working with the upper half of our body so extensively with load on the pole.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that you guys will get from the podcast overall is that the body is all connected. And so to kind of think of it, as I kind of stated before, as one whole ecosystem and not just like, well, I'm saying this and my leg is doing that. Everything is all working together. So.
Okay, and so real quick, just for like 1 or 2 minutes before we close, we're just going to do a little body check-in for you guys, with you guys. So if you just want to take a seat, maybe close your eyes, we're just going to take a couple deep breaths and we're just going to cue through and check in with our upper body, just noticing how we're feeling. And you can take that with you. We're not judging our bodies here. We're not judging where our feelings are. We're just noticing if there's any areas of tension that maybe we missed and couldn't really feel before without getting that check-in. Because sometimes our brain can block those pains and we can just put it up to tension and let it go away. So with that, if you want to let the eyes flutter closed and take a deep breath in, and exhale, sighing it out with an open mouth. Taking a deep breath in. And another big sigh out. Just allowing your breath to come back to natural, but trying to breathe slightly deeper down from the chest into the belly. Maybe breathe into the back of the ribs. As you do so, noticing how your breath expansion feels, if you're able to expand well, or if it feels harder to let your breath fully expand. Noticing how your forehead's feeling and your temples, if you're having any tension headaches going on from the back of the neck. It could be minimal, it could be more aggressive. Just checking in. Maybe noticing how your jaw is feeling, if you've been clenching your jaw more, if you're holding tension behind the ears. It's really easy to hold tension in the jaw and the ears when you're doing so much load with the arms. So just checking in. Maybe you give a big yawn. Just seeing how you're feeling, noticing if you can stretch the jaw. Maybe you check in through the neck, through the back of the neck and the sides. Are you holding any tension if you lean your head left or right? Or give it a little twist? Or even all the way to the collarbones. Do we hold any tension along here? Are we holding any tension towards the corners of our shoulders? Just noticing how the chest is feeling, if we're holding any tightness there, or if on the back side of the armpits, towards the back body, into the ribs, towards the lats, if we're holding any tightness or fatigue. And from there, taking a deep breath in and exhaling it out, letting the eyes flutter open, and just noticing how you felt from taking those few breaths with us, noticing if you were able to find any new areas of pain, new areas of tension, or if you're able to notice where some referred pain was that you might need to be stretching right before. But with that, I'm Michelle, and this is our quick breakdown of the rotator cuff and why it plays such a big role in keeping pole dancers strong and injury-free.
And if there's one takeaway from today, is that healthy shoulders come from stability and control, not just.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I hope this episode helped you understand everything that you weren't understanding before. And if you already knew about the rotator cuff, maybe you were able to learn something new.
In our next episode, we're going to break down some of the most common injuries that dancers hear about, including tears, tendinosis versus tendinitis, strains, dislocations, and bursitis, and what those actually mean for your training and recovery.
And until next time, keep training smart, keep checking in with your body. I hope you have a great time with your pole practice.
Thank you for listening to the Pole Rehab Podcast.